Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm delighted to be joined by ex-Celt Barry Smith. Welcome to the show, Barry.
Thanks very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. I was just saying there before we came on air, Barry, that I'm always intrigued to hear about Neely Mochan, and I know that you were in and around the club at the time that Neely was a kitman, so hopefully we can share some experiences with us on the legendary figure that is Neely Mochan. But let's go a wee bit further back, Barry. What was your kind of footballing upbringing like when you go right back to as a youngster?
I started kicking the ball as young as I can remember, playing with the school team, and I'm born and bred in Paisley. So I played with St Mary's primary school when I was in primary one. Played my brother's team, and then gradually went into boys club football. Played with Renfrew Waverley, and then went to St Mirren Boys Club, and then spent maybe about 4 years at Barhead Boys Club before joining the Celtic Boys Club, and taking everything that went from there.
See, when you look back, Barry, I've spoken to a lot of people who are still in the game, who went through the same pathway as yourself, boys club football, maybe joining a club that was affiliated with one of the professional clubs, ground staff, S-forms. It's all changed now. Do you think it's changed for the better?
Personally, no. I think I had a good grounding. I know the kids can play with the school now, but there was a spell there where they weren't allowed, if they were affiliated to a club, they weren't allowed to play school football. For me, as you're growing up, the more games you play, the more you learn about yourself, and the more you learn about the game. I was playing, Saturday morning for the school team, and then playing Saturday afternoon, and then maybe Sunday morning for a boys club team, just depending how the fixtures went. But I think the more you played, the more you learned about the game. Whereas now, I think it's too regimented. It's kind of the kids play against the same players for 5, 6, 7 years, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into a league team and don't know how to handle it. When we were growing up, we played a lot of different teams, a lot of different players, and you had to adapt, which held you in a good stead, further down the line.
Definitely. As I said, it's the same kind of opinion I'm getting from a lot of people of your era and older eras. And we see at Celtic, we see a lot of young guys showing some promise, Barry. I mean, one of the examples would be Calvin Miller, regarded as one of the finest players in the world at one point. But then if you're not playing the games when you're 19, 20, 21, it's almost as if the development kind of stops. Do you think there's anything that can be done in Scotland that will maybe be a hybrid of what was done back then and embracing all the academy and pro youth stuff that is in place now?
I think it's really difficult. I think they tried to get back to reserve football, but finances dictate what a lot of clubs have, what a lot of clubs can do with the reserve team. When I was growing up, the reserve team played the opposite fixture from the first team. So if you were playing Dundee United, or the first team were playing Dundee United at home, we played Dundee United away at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. And the senior players that weren't involved with the first team played in the reserve team, and that made the young ones, learn, because they were playing with experienced pros against experienced pros, and you certainly learned a lot for the games as well, because you weren't allowed to get away with making mistakes. It made you a man as soon as possible, whereas I think the young ones nowadays aren't as mature as what we were then made to be, basically, because you were playing with experienced pros.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Barry. You said you joined the boys club there, and there was obviously a huge amount of players that progressed to Celtic after that. What was your progression? Did you have to go into the ground staff?
I was very fortunate. I stayed on at school. Relatively intelligent, so I stayed on at school, and I had the choice between going and studying physics at university or going into Celtic. And I think there was only one choice there. But because I stayed on that extra year at school, it meant that I sort of missed out on the ground staff and went straight to full-time football. But because of the age I was still doing the ground staff stuff. And as you say, nearly mocking was a hard learning curve at times, because I was still quite naive. But a great guy to work under at that time. He didn't let you away with much, and was full of tricks as well.
Oh yeah, I've spoken to a lot of the kind of first teamers, Barry, who was around about Celtic at that time, Peter Grant, Andy Walker, guys like that who remember nearly as being a bit of a tyrant when it came to trying to get a new pair of football boots. But also, he was good for keeping a lot of the guys' feet on the ground. Is that something that you also saw in Neely Morecambe?
Oh, definitely. To try and get a pair of boots off him was, it was incredible what you had to do. They had to be hanging off you. Even if it was a hole in them, he would say, "Oh, you've got a few games out of that, son." He was just, it was hard, but I think it was a lesson, and you don't just get given stuff because you think you need it. You have to earn it. And he always gave you what you needed. That was a good thing, but he made you sweat for it. But to me, it was all part of learning and all part of life. And I think, Neil had a great life at Celtic, and he really enjoyed working with the kids, because I think you get rewarded when you see the guys going on the pitch as well. Guys that come under his, sort of wing as such. I think he really took pride in the fact that some of these guys went through and played in the first team.
Oh, without a doubt. And Celtic had a real tradition of that, Barry, when you look right back to the 50s, right through 60s, 70s and 80s. Who was amongst your crop then? Who was the players you were playing alongside when you signed for Celtic?
At the time, I think there was only 3 S forms. Myself, Brian McLaughlin and Stuart Gray were the only 3 that really came in at that time. I think the structure was sort of, it was okay at the time, but we were the only S forms. But then the age group above was the likes of Mark Donachie, Brian O'Neill, Jerry Britton. The reserve team was Raymond McStay, Jerry Craney, Dougie McCarrison. A lot of good players, which probably helped in itself. Getting into a team like that was used to winning. And they were comfortable, playing football. It probably made it easy to try and, break into that reserve team as well.
Who were you dealing with, Barry? Because I know it was around about the time with Liam Brady coming in as the manager. So had the talks already started with you signing for Celtic prior to Liam's arrival?
Billy, had just left, and Tommy Craig. I actually signed under Tommy Craig. He was the sort of interim manager when I signed my professional forms. But Liam came in that summer, and that's who I was really dealing with. But at that stage, I looked up to Bobby Lennox and Benny Rooney, who took care of the reserves. They were the guys that I reported to and, had a lot of respect for. And, guys that sort of made the football enjoyable at that time,
Bobby Lennox, a Lisbon Lion, and he's coaching the kids. Barry, what did you learn for the Buzzbomb?
No, Bobby was brilliant. It's just wee things. It wasn't going on and, coaching day after day. Because I think at that time, I think nowadays the kids are given too much information, and they don't have to think for themselves. Whereas I think the approach at that time was, well, you're going to have to think for yourself in a game. There are grey areas. It's not just black and white. You're going to have to think during the game. So a lot of it was down to, working it out for yourself, which I also think really helped. But Bobby was a great laugh, and he was always there if you needed him. If you had a question, you weren't sure, and you went and seen him, he would always answer. Benny the same, So they were great guys to work under.
Oh, definitely. What an apprenticeship that would have been. You mentioned a couple of the other boys that you came in as S-form signings, and all 3 broke into the first team eventually. When you were looking around the reserves, Barry, who impressed you? I've seen a few of the names. Jamie McCulkin was there or thereabouts, Raymond McStay, Stevie Fulton. Who impressed you?
I think there was a lot of good players, and unfortunately, not everybody went and made a career out of football. You talk about Billy Dolan was probably the person I've eyed for at right back. Who Billy had played in the Scottish under-16 team, I think. Very good player. So I'm looking at him going, well, I've really got to knock him off his spot. But again, he was a very good player. But I guess when you're playing with guys like Jerry Craney and Jerry Britton, and you're looking forward, and you can see their movement, and you can see the guys are going to score. That's probably the guys I sort of looked up to. And I guess Big Stuarty Balmer was there for a wee spell, who was no nonsense, but again, a guy that I looked up to because he was just maybe 2, 3, 4 years older than us, that still playing reserves, but he had that determination that he was going to make it, and he ended up with a very good career down south, so there's a lot of good players.
Oh, definitely. Looking at your progression, it was pretty quick. When you look at when you signed in the June of '91, and then you make your debut just a few months later, how did that materialise? What was the kind of advice that Liam Brady gave you? How did he break the news to you?
Well, wasn't he? I mean, I trained with the reserves on a Friday, and I think there was quite a few injuries at the time. And I got a phone call on the Friday night saying, "Listen, don't come to the reserve game. You're going with the first team." And it was as simple as that. I was on the bench at Brockville at the time, and I'm thinking, geez, well, if anybody gets injured here, I'm going on, which was a total shock to my system. It's Celtic, and it's, it was an amazing feeling, getting the chance to go in and, play for, I think it was just about an hour or something like that, come on as a sub for somebody off injured, but it was just an amazing feeling to, pull on the hoops and play in the first team.
Oh, without a doubt. And you were only 17 at the time, Barry, weren't you?
Aye, yeah. Which again was, it was a quick progression for us, because I'd only started, in it, Celtic Park that summer, and to get a, run in for a game for the first team, within, 4 or 5 months was, a tremendous achievement, and when I look back with, a lot of pride.
Oh, without a doubt, aye. I mean, as a fan going to the games at that time, Barry, I'm looking around at the likes of Paul McStay, John Collins, Charlie Nicholas, guys who were standouts. I also liked Derek White, who obviously had made his debut, like yourself, at 17. How helpful were the senior pros to you when you started breaking into the first team?
I mean, I still keep in touch with Granny, a top guy who, he looked after us, on the pitch. But I guess, I mean, at the time, the senior players were, they were going through a hard time as well, so for as much as they had to look after themselves, everybody had a wee word in your ear and, try to make the best, comments they could to yourself, to myself. So, Tony Mowbray was there at the time, and, I've got a lot of respect for him because he was the one that, probably took me aside and went, listen, you just have to relax and go and play your game. You wouldn't have been asked to play if they didn't think you were good enough. So, I've got a lot of respect for him too.
Mm-hmm. A few of your teammates have said that he had the leadership qualities of a captain when he played for Celtic in the early 90s, and that sounds similar to what you've just said yourself, Barry. I remember Liam Brady came in, it was like in a blaze of glory, the fans were up, very optimistic, bringing in quite a lot of big signings. But just after your debut, we went over to Switzerland and we lost to Neuchâtel Xamax. Were you involved in the squad? Was there any conversation with Liam Brady about how you would be involved in the first team going forward?
There wasn't any conversation. I think it was, as a 17-year-old, you're probably just like, I'm delighted to be involved with, Celtic's first team. So there wasn't really many conversations. I went to Neuchâtel, and, again, it was an eye-opener. For myself, it was more the experience for me, every day it's getting beaten. They were a very good team at the time. I think with the Hassan twins, the brothers, and it was just really the experience for me. It wasn't, the result, obviously nobody liked, but, for me, it was more about getting the chance, European football with Celtic, and getting the opportunity to go and see what it's like abroad.
That was a real blow, obviously, going over there. I remember thinking back to that, and Big Cascarino wrote about it in his book as well, and he knew his time was up around about that time over in Switzerland. I mean, how despondent must it be, being a young kid in amongst the first team, Barry, coming back on the plane? Was it just really doom and gloom at that stage?
Well, he was just get beat by a heavy scoreline, and you're new to it, but everybody's hurting at that time. Things weren't, I wouldn't say they were going great in the league front either. So you're coming off the back of a heavy defeat and you're going straight back into a league game, which is never easy. But as a young boy, as I say, it doesn't really affect you that much in that, you're still learning your trade, so for as much as you're hurting with the result, as much as everybody else, you're still sort of getting a feel for things. I'm still 17, I'm still learning the game, but probably the biggest thing for me is you don't want to feel like that again. You don't want to feel that, after such a heavy defeat, you don't want to have that feeling again, and that spurs you on to, want to win games.
Absolutely. You've been in the game now, Barry, for 30 years, the professional game. When you look back at Liam Brady, we know it didn't work out, but what's your memories of him yourself as a coach and as a manager?
I mean, Liam came and played in the reserve team a few times, and it tremendous to play with. I mean, he was still, his ability, you just don't lose that ability. So it was good to play with him. But he brought different things. I didn't really train with the first team that often, apart from when I was involved in the squads. But, just the aura about him, it was Liam Brady, he had such a tremendous career. And then to go and, play under him, it's, again, I look at fortunate that I was able to do that.
When you look around at that time, we had yourself, Mark McNally, Jerry Craney, Brian O'Neill, Stevie Fulton was there or thereabouts until he moved. All, making a claim for a first team jersey. Why do you think it is that these big name signings come up from down south and fail to actually set the heather alight? We had great hopes for the likes of Stuart Slater and, Gary Gillespie had bad injuries, Tony Cascarino. What do you think it is? Is it just because people don't realise how tough it is up in Scotland, Barry?
Without a doubt. I think, Scottish football gets a very bad name down south, but a lot of them have never seen a game. And it is a different game up here, but it's not an easy ride. And I think a lot of the players come up expecting an easy ride and be able to just showboat and not have to work hard because it was Celtic they were playing for. But Celtic fans demand that you work hard first and foremost. They're like any other team. You see Celtic just now, every single player on that pitch works their socks off. If you look at when Henrik Larsson was playing, he's idolised by Celtic fans, but he worked his socks off for that, for the club. And I think a lot of the guys that did come up thought they were coming up for an easy ride and it was good money probably. But certainly it wasn't that. And I think a lot of them probably didn't anticipate how difficult it was.
Without a doubt. I remember when Liam Brady eventually resigned or was let go, Barry, there was a couple of games where the first team were looked after by Frank Connor. I had the great pleasure of meeting Frank through a pal of mine, the late Graham Morrison. And Frank was a character when I met him. So what's your memories of Frank Connor, the guy who went unbeaten as a Celtic manager?
Frank was brilliant for me as well. He was a real, influence on us. He got the best out of me just by the way he treated me. And a lot of time for Frank. He just sort of he fitted into Celtic. His demands, were very high, and you didn't want to let him down. Because he gave you everything, and you wanted to make sure you gave him everything, and he was good friends with Joe Jordan at the time, and Joe was there as well. So that you know, Frank was a real big influence on me.
Well, you're saying he had standards, Barry. When I went to speak to him, he pulled me up for not having a shave that day. So he's still got the same standards, you know.
He still pulls me up when I'm here.
Lou McCarry comes in. Celtic were struggling. Lou McCarry comes in. What was the change? What was the biggest change that you saw between Liam Brady and Lou McCarry?
Where do I start with Lou? Lou was, you know, every manager's got their own ideas and the way they want to do things. Lou was totally, you know, it was the fitness side of things, and you know, some of the things that you know, it wasn't just the young ones had to do. The first team had to do was, you know, incredible in terms of trying to get fit. Well, not trying to get fit, but the fitness levels that Lou wanted. And it was tough, but I don't think that's what they needed at that time. You know, that's me as a young kid looking at it. I don't think they needed the sort of tough love. That's no what it was about at that time. And I think, you know, if you're going to be that person, then you have to be, you know, fully committed yourself. You know, being there on a daily basis, and you know, putting your demands on the players on a daily basis, and that probably wasn't the case at the time.
No. I mean, I don't think Frank McAvenny liked the hard running and all that kind of stuff, Barry. Having spoken to Frank about that as well. But you know, one of the games that I always look back on, quite a historic match, was when the Celtic fans were banned from going to Ibrox. You started that day, didn't you? The 1-1 game at Ibrox. How surreal was that?
It was, you know, it was incredible. You know, especially when John put his 1-0 up. You know, and there was silence. You know, and you're at Ibrox, and it's, you know, to be playing in that was, you know, it was surreal. You know, something that will probably never happen again, I wouldn't imagine. You know, I mean, Ibrox is hostile at the best of times, you know, but in an Old Firm game with no Celtic fans, you know, it was very intimidating. But the learning thing for me there was that nothing could get worse, you know, in terms of hostility, because that's as hostile as it can possibly be. And for me, I was able to shut the crowd out from that point on, because I knew that none could be as bad. So it was a great experience, you know, playing in front of that. For as much as it was surreal, it was, you know, a great experience. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but you know, it's still a great experience.
Oh, definitely. When did you become aware, Barry, that there was issues, you know, in the highest echelons of the club and the fans started to revolt? When, as a player, did you become aware of the disharmony?
Again, as a young kid, you're pretty much shielded for a lot of that. You know, I just wanted to play football. I just wanted to play at Celtic. So you're pretty much, the senior players would have felt it a lot more than the younger ones, because again, you're a wee bit naive and you just think that Celtic, well, none can go wrong at Celtic, you know. So we just turned up for training, went and trained, and went and played games. But you know, there obviously was a lot of disharmony at the time, and you know, thankfully, you know, the club come through it.
Oh, absolutely, Barry. I remember you went down to play Manchester United in the Mark Hughes testimonial. It was memorable for a number of different reasons. I think Chick Charnley nutmegged Eric Cantona or something like that. What's your memories of that game? You were up against all the greats, weren't you? Roy Keane, Ryan Giggs.
Well, the thing I think we played Aberdeen the last game of the season on the Saturday. I played in a reserve game on the Sunday, and then went down to Old Trafford and played in the Monday in the testimonial. So I was absolutely shattered by that point. But again, you're playing at Old Trafford. Probably as a kid, you dream about things like that. You're playing against the Premiership winners, or the English top leagues winners at that stage as well. So, you know, I ended up playing against Ryan Giggs, and you know, I think I had to buy a ticket back in, you know, just because it sold me that many dummies, you know. So, but aye, it was a great experience. You know, Chick Chan was playing with Celtic as well, which was something different. But playing against guys like Cantona and, you know, Hughes and Giggs and Scholes, and, you know, something you'll never forget.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, Lou McCarry leaves, Fergus McCann's taken over, and Tommy Burns comes in, Barry. What's your memories of Tommy? Everybody I've ever spoken to regarding Tommy, you know, describes him as a special man. What was his kind of vision for the youth, and what's your memories of Tommy?
I think, you know, the first thing he did, he took, I always remember pre-season, he took maybe 3 or 4 of the young ones, myself included, and stuck them in the first team's training, because he wanted to get back to that, you know, the kids come through the system and they play in Celtic's first team, obviously if you're good enough. You know, and he really, you know, he Celtic, you already know, Celtic runs through his blood, and he probably made the best decision for me that he could have. At the time, I probably didn't agree, but looking back and you know, what he did for me at the time was, you know, he knew what was right for me. When I moved up to Dundee, he knew that was the right thing to do. And, you know, at the time I didn't want to thank him, but, you know, if I had the chance, I would like, you know, I would have, because it was the right decision. But he always had time for, you know, he would never walk past you. You know, whether you were a senior player, whether you were a kid, he would never walk past you in the corridor. He always, you know, wanted to speak and wanted to talk football, and, you know, you can't help but learn from a guy like that.
21 years of age, Barry. You sound as though at the time, obviously, you wouldn't have wanted to leave Celtic, but looking back, you know, that connection you have with Dundee, the amount of games you played there, you went on to manage the club. You had a testimonial, you're a club legend. So you go to Dundee. How long did it take for you to realise that there was a good fit there between you and the club?
No, well, you know, I was grateful to Jim Duffy for taking a chance at the time, because at that stage I was probably just playing reserve football. But he obviously seen something when he came and watched us that he liked, and took us up to Dundee. And whether it was, I think, you never know if it's going to be a good fit, but you make it a good fit. And I knew that if I worked hard, and I just wanted to play first team football. You know, I just wanted to get out and play, you know, for a first team. And it ended up, you know, a great, you know, decision, as I say, with Tommy. But, you know, also I worked hard to make sure that I stayed in that team, and, you know, the rest history, basically.
Oh yeah, a special mention for Jim Duffy, obviously having a wee heart scare fairly recently, Barry. So hopefully he's doing okay. I know that you've teamed up with him again at Dumbarton, and he's on the mend. Hopefully for Jim Duffy, another ex-Celt as well. When you look through your playing career, you had a very successful spell over in Iceland. What was the culture like over there? Was it a culture shock, or did that suit you over there?
Well, at the time, I'd just finished my 11th year at Dundee, and I had to make a decision within. There was a new manager coming in, and I had to make a decision within 2 weeks whether I was going to Iceland or no. So it was a sort of off the cuff. I just went, oh, do you know what? I'm going to try something different. Didn't really know what to expect, but again, I loved it. I go back every second year now to catch up with the guys, just because I love the country. The people were brilliant. It did take a wee bit of time to settle. You know, it was tough. You know, the first 6-7 weeks, found it really tough, and then, you know, I got myself into the team and didn't really look back. But once you're in their circle, they're good people and they look after you. And, you know, I still keep in touch with the players and the directors at the club, you know, because I really enjoy my time. As I say, I go back every second year to catch up with them.
That's brilliant. Did you see some signs at that point, Barry, that Iceland would actually become a bit of a force on an international level?
I don't think at that stage. I think it was just becoming, you know, at that point they were beginning to get it right, the structure right. The big thing for me is they've got so many big indoor halls that are full size that the kids can go and play in, and, you know, they're just left open. Or at that time they were just left open. Kids could go in and use them anytime they wanted. Didn't have to pay. But it's obviously cold over there. So in the winter months, they weren't standing about in the freezing rain, you know, trying to play football, which happens over here. And I think from that, it gave them the sort of foundation to work from, and gave the coaches a chance to work with the kids on technique, basically. I ended up with the two fullbacks. I think they're still playing with the Icelandic national team. Played in the same team as me at Valor.
Right.
Burke and Mar and Ari. You know, so I was fortunate at that stage they were only kids, and you know, but they've went on and had successful careers and played in the national team. So it was good for that point of view as well.
When you came back to Scotland, all roads lead to Dens Park for you, it would seem, Barry. And your tenure as a manager, it's the type of thing that, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody made a film about it, where you get your 25 points deducted, and somehow, with absolutely no resources and very, very few players, you managed to survive. Talk us through that, Barry. What I mean, how on earth did you approach that?
Well, I mean, I guess for the start off, you know, you're fortunate that you've still got your job. The club's went into administration, and you treat it with the proper respect that you should, that you're fortunate to have your job. But in saying that, I had a good chief executive at the time, Harry McLean, and I had a great set of boys. You know, guys that I knew, but I was taking the youth academy at the time, so I sort of knew them in passing. Knew a lot of them were good players, and again, Gordon Chisholm and Billy Dawes at the time said to us, "Listen, if you get offered it, take it," which I appreciated because they didn't have to say that, they were losing their jobs. Mm-hmm. But you know, you grab it with both hands. It was a dream for me again to become the manager at Dundee that I'd spent that long time at. Yeah. But it wasn't the best circumstances, so you've got to make the best of these circumstances, which we did. But you know, this guy, the biggest help for me there, for as much as chief executive was good, Big Rab Douglas was there, who's still, you know, a very good friend of mine to this day. We stay pretty much as neighbours, and you know, he was a tremendous help. You know, on the park, unbelievable keeper, but off the park, you know, the way he got the boys gelled together, and you know, I think folk forget at that stage, they were actually about third or fourth bottom anyway before the 25 points deduction, which wasn't a true reflection of the players. Mm-hmm. But Big Rab, you know, grabbed it with the scruff of the neck as well, and he, you know, he had a lot of parties at his house that year. So,
what's the name of his nightclub, Barry?
Studs, it's called. Studs and
Stilettos. That's right,
aye. So I think it's been shut for the past 8 weeks, which isn't it's not doing him any favours. But no, you know, it's I've got a lot of time for Robert, and you know, he was a big influence in the team at that time as well as being, you know, a top class goalkeeper.
Oh, definitely. I've met him a couple of times, and you know, he was brilliant. And I did mention yourself when we did an event and we done a Q&A. And he was speaking about that period. Now, one other conversation I had with Brian McClare, as it happens, about management was, he said he would never come back to management, Barry, because clubs just don't give you enough time. And if he tried to do anything, it would be a long-term project. And I know some of your tenures, quite a few of them have been like one season at a time. You think it's time Scottish football revisited a period where they give you a bit of breathing space and they allow you to try and develop something?
I think every manager would say yes to that, but you know, realistically, that's not really going to happen, I don't think. There's too much worry about, you know, social media, you know, and the influence that social media has on, you know, managers' tenures and stuff like that is incredible. Boards feel, you know, really under pressure when the social media aspect starts to, you know, get on top of them. And the first thing that they do, once it goes on top of them, is the manager, you know, gets the brunt of it. Mm-hmm. But you can understand for the board's point of view, because if they fans stop going to games, then the club then suffers. And when it comes down to the club's a bigger picture. So there are a few managers that have had successful times, you know, and been at clubs for a, you know, good few years. Jim McInally being one. You know, he's got a very good chairman up at Peterhead that, you know, trusts him and lets him go on with his job. And I think Jim's been there for 7-8 years, I think, and had promotions and relegations. So, you know, that would be something that, you know, everybody would appreciate. But I think in management, the one thing for certain is, you know, you're going to get the sack at some point, you know, and I think once you know that, you recognise that and you get into the job knowing that, then you can do your job properly, because you know that's going to happen.
Over the last 4 months, Barry, we've all been thrown into disarray. Everybody's lives have been, and we're starting to see, you know, football filtering back in. How's it affected you yourself, and how have you managed to kind of keep your hand in over the last 4 months?
Well, it's difficult, you know. I'm actually in the helping academy at Dundee again, but we're all put in furlough, so you actually can't. You're not allowed to have contact with the kids, you know. But we've had one of the guys who's known for furlough. He's been relaying information to the kids, keeping them ticking over, keeping them fit, and giving them technical exercises. So we've got a fair idea that you know, they've been doing certain things, but it's tough, because you want to be out there on the training pitch with the kids, you know, and helping them, and, you know, and doing as much as you can, because the age group I take, it's an important year for them. There's got decisions to be made for them in terms of whether they go, you know, get their apprenticeship or not. Mm-hmm. So having lost 4 months of the season, you know, it's been really tough for them, but I think it's been tough for all the coaches as well, because they want to help the kids. So the sooner we get back to some normality, the better, you know.
Oh, definitely. Are you seeing enough now, Barry? Are you seeing enough talent to suggest that the future is going to be bright for Scotland again?
I think, looking at the Scottish national team at the moment, there's a lot of, you know, guys playing in the Premiership, or, you know, that are the Championship down south, or, you know, the Premiership in Scotland, that have got very good ability. It's just giving them that length of time that, you know, they're able to gel as a team. You know, my own thoughts in the Scotland manager's job is that they should be given at least 2 campaigns, mm-hmm. so that the first campaign, if they don't make it, they're not just, well, we didn't make that. That's you lost your job. They should be given, you know, at least 2 campaigns to build a team. You know, because that's what, you know, you look at Portugal, Spain. They all kept the same team, you know, for a length of period that allowed the team to gel together. And yeah, there'll be latecomers and guys that show throughout the season that should be in that squad, but there should be a good core there, mm-hmm. That you're able to build your team round about. And I think there's enough good players there now that if Steve Clarke gets the opportunity, you know, to have a couple of campaigns, then there's enough to build a team round. There's enough. I think there's a lot of good players just waiting for that team to come together.
It'd be great. What a difference it would make. I mean, 1998 until 2020 is a long time to wait, Barry, you know, but it would be fantastic. My age group certainly doesn't take it for granted, as maybe the age group older than me probably did, that we were going to, you know, actually get into these finals. But I've really enjoyed talking about your football career, particularly your Celtic stories, Barry. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
I'll just leave you with one, Paul, with Neil Malkin. I don't know if you've heard the one before. He's tricked with a ping pong ball. And he used to put the Vaseline in his head, and, you know, he'd throw it up, and all the kids would be trying it, and it'd be going, bouncing off their head and going all over the place. And there was one day he went to Jackie Jakinovsky, who his talent was unbelievable. And he went, Jackie, watch this. And he's done it. He's nearly caught the ping pong ball in his forehead with the Vaseline. But Jackie didn't realise the Vaseline was on, obviously. And Jackie's went and tried it. And he very near done it. You know, all the young ones are standing about going, he's nearly done that, you know. But nearly took great pleasure in showing off that he could catch this ping pong ball in his head. But he actually had Vaseline on it so that he could catch it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Barry, I have heard that, but you know what? It's never been on the podcast, so thank you very much for sharing it.